Thank you for joining me today, Pouyan and Ray, to talk about our upcoming Forecast 2026 book. Our book is being written right now by the whole MMA team, and we're expected to have the book available by December 15th. Right now, we're in the final few days here of our big annual forecast pre-order event. So I was hoping today to have a conversation from two of the main writers, Pouyan and Ray, hear about how the book is going so far, and I guess I want to start with the first question of tell me the writing process. Ray, if you want to kick it off, where are we at right now, or where are you at right now with the writing process? Have you already begun? And just kind of talk us through what happens behind the scenes.
We've got most of the book done. I would say everything except the markets will be completed by next week, the first week of November. And that's when we start working the next 2 weeks on the markets. So we are probably 75% through, and it's a very exciting year coming up. I'm sure Pouyan would agree with that.
Oh, definitely. This is my first year getting involved in writing the forecast book, and it's been a huge learning experience. I think you've set the bar so high, Ray, in that every time I come to write anything, I keep thinking, what would Ray do? So it's been a real eye-opening experience for me. I've honestly learned so much doing it. And as every day goes by, as all the thoughts settle in my mind, I keep realizing new information. I'm like, oh, I wish I could add that back into the chapter as well. But I've already written too much. I'll leave it for next year.
Well,
But
you're
it's
right. This is my favorite time of the year for just the idea of writing the book and getting inspired with a vision of what's going to happen next year. It always comes to me. As I'm writing this book, I start usually in August, September. We finish it by November 20th. And it does open up a lot of insights, eureka moments, if you will, to be writing this book when you begin to actually see how these aspects, how these planetary combinations are manifesting in today's world as we enter into a new year. It's always very exciting.
So, as you've written this book so far, you talked a little bit about inspiration that you have. Have you had any moments so far, any aha moments when you're writing this book and some thought triggers you from what you've written in the past books, whether it be Forecast 2025 or even past that, and talked about, this is what you see coming up throughout the year? Do you have any of those moments, or do most of them come up right now when you're writing it and you realize it's almost like you're rewriting what you've written before?
So you want me to address that first?
Either
Yeah.
one of you.
Yeah. Well, why don't I address it first? Because I was the one who wrote most of the books, all the books really in the past, with some help from our analysts. But this year is a little bit different, and I did have an aha moment when I was looking at the Aries vortex. Okay, that's when Saturn and Neptune come together every 36 years, and but it's also Uranus trine Pluto with the midpoint at 0 degrees of Aries. So that those two things don't happen ever. I've never seen them happen. But the Saturn is the midpoint of Uranus Neptune's midpoint, or Saturn on the midpoint of Uranus trine Pluto, I should say. Saturn on the midpoint of Uranus trine Pluto has correlated with a lot of unrest in the past, a lot of wars, conflicts throughout the world. But when Neptune's at the midpoint of Uranus and Pluto, I was surprised to see that conflicts end and there's at least a 10-year period of world peace. So that was quite an eye opener for me because we're in that period where the peak is 2026. And it suggests within 1 year of this February aspect in 2026, the Saturn Neptune, that within 1 year that we historically would start a period of world peace. And that was an enlightening moment for me to see that. Pouyan, did you come up with any aha moments? I read several of them in your reports. I'm sure you did.
Yeah, there were a few. But I think the most profound one for me was it actually came after I wrote about the transit of Pluto into Aquarius. I was looking at the other outer planets and their transits. And by the time I got down to the transit of Saturn, I realized that there seems to be a pattern here, looking at the transits of Saturn. But I'm not sure I can give all the credit to Saturn. It seems to be linked with Pluto itself. And it was, for me, this was the most beautiful aha moment, where I realized that every time Pluto changes signs, there is a huge shift in the underlying financial systems of the world. And then I kind of started going down a rabbit hole, which I haven't really written about in the Pluto section per se, but it was the fact that, for example, I didn't even know that Isaac Newton became Master of the Mint in the UK. And that happened just as Pluto ingressed into Cancer. And then when it went on to ingress into Leo, the next sign, that's when the Bank of England was initially formed in 1694. And every time it changed signs, there was some form of crisis within the leading financial system. At that time, it was the Bank of England. And that slowly changed hands as Pluto made his 250-year transit and came back down towards Cancer. The Federal Reserve Board was born. And as it then ingressed into Leo, well, then you had the Bretton Woods Agreement being formed, the World Bank and the IMF was formed. And those transitions are beautiful and relevant to what's happening today. So it went on. We ended up seeing another big change as Pluto ingressed into the world axis, 0 degrees Libra. And that was when Nixon announced that he was going to decouple gold from the US dollar. And then we had the next big transit. I guess I call them the big transits when they hit the 0 degrees cardinal signs, when it went into 0 degrees Capricorn. That's when we had the global financial crisis in 2008.
Yeah.
And now Pluto has ingressed into Aquarius. It's in a new sign. It's in the opposite sign to when the Bank of England was first formed and when the Bretton Woods Agreement was created. And from based on what I've seen on patterns of Pluto ingresses into signs, I'm expecting something big to happen to the global financial system. Not as big as saying, oh, the whole system is going to collapse. It doesn't collapse. It always evolves, and it evolves in line with the nature of that sign. And Aquarius rules over technology and digital currencies. And we're already seeing, I mean, the ingress, we're a couple of years into the ingress now. And this year, we've already seen cryptocurrencies, well, especially Bitcoin being adopted and Ethereum as ETFs. And I think that's the first step of some level of legitimacy. And I can see more of that happening over the next few years, especially as the other planets fall into place. It's almost like a gear where Pluto has to go in, and then Uranus will trigger something, and then Saturn will trigger something. And I think all those triggers are about to happen in the next 2 to 3 years.
Very good.
Aside from the aha moments and moments of clarity you have, the good moments, Ray, I'll direct this question at you. What's always the most difficult part of writing this annual book?
The financial markets. The financial markets, here you are trying to give a blueprint, a map, if you will, of what these different markets are going to do over the next year before you even get into that year. We're going to be writing our market outlook in the first 2 weeks of November to cover the whole of 2026. Well, it's hard to get real specific because market cycles reset every time what we call a primary cycle happens. Then the sub-cycles reset, or if a longer term cycle happens, then its sub-cycles reset. And we got a general range where that happens. But once it happens, we have to reset the next ones that come. And that's very difficult to anticipate beyond maybe, say, the first 3 to 6 months of the year. But we do a pretty good job of it anyway. And then, of course, the price targets change because once you get a high and a low of a cycle, you have a new projection for the next cycle. So this is always difficult trying to anticipate what's going to happen as you get past the first quarter of the year, time-wise and price-wise. It's a real challenge, but I think we do a pretty good job. And the way we compensate for that is through updates that are given on our monthly newsletters or our weekly reports or even our daily reports. We're constantly fine-tuning and making those kinds of revisions and adjustments as we go along through the year and see the patterns unfold in the time bands that we gave, and then start new time bands for projections with each new one that begins.
So as we move forward, you said the financial markets are the most challenging. Can you tell us, for people who haven't read this before, can you just do a high level, Ray, talking about what different markets will be covered? And then maybe Pouyan, you could touch on some of the major themes that will be covered in the book.
You want me to identify what the various markets are we cover?
Yes.
Okay, well, first of all, we start with a broad view. We go into, the financial picture for the United States, the Federal Reserve Board, the world economy based on the nodal cycle. And then we go into the stock market. And this year is different because not only am I going to cover the Dow Jones Industrials, but Vivka Held, the new director of the Merriman Market Timing Academy, which is just underway now, the 2-year program. She's going to cover the section on the NASDAQ for the first time ever in our annual forecast book. Then we go into gold, which Wyatt and I will cover. Then silver, which Pouyan is going to cover. Then we cover the currencies, which will be analyzed by Ulrich Aspegren of Switzerland and Gianni Di Poche, who was the former director of the MMTA and covers many of our reports. He's a very good currency analyst. Then we go into treasury notes and interest rates by Gianni. Pouyan covers crude oil. Wyatt Fellows, who's working on the gold market with me, will cover all the grains and the weather too. I will cover Bitcoin. So those are the markets that we'll cover this year.
And I guess the first few chapters of the book will look at the mundane landscape. Ray will be covering the planetary aspects that he discussed at the top of this video. So the most important one is the Aries vortex, looking at the Pluto-Uranus trine with Neptune and Saturn at the midpoint at 0 degrees Aries. And then there's a couple of chapters where I delve into prior transits of the outer planets, starting from Pluto, working my way down to Jupiter. I've also been more involved in looking at the ingress charts, looking at the US ingress charts for the seasons, trying to forecast what is about to happen, or what I would speculate is going to happen for each 3-month period using the ingress charts over Washington, D.C. And right at the end, there's also an annual overview looking at favorable and unfavorable periods during the year and the planetary retrogrades, the retrogrades of Mars, Venus, and Mercury. We won't have a Mars retrograde in 2026, but we do have quite an important Venus one that kind of aligns again with the Mercury retrograde at the same time. So looking at what that will mean and the likely forecasts that we can foresee at this stage for those events.
I'd like to also add that I'm going to be putting in another edition chapter in this year's book on the horoscope of mankind, which was presented to us by Claude Weiss at the Lake Blood Conference in late 2024. I introduced it last year. It worked out pretty good, and it's really phenomenal what's coming up the next couple of years as a transit of Pluto is going to make a T-square to that solar eclipse that preceded the Neptune-Pluto conjunction opposite Uranus. In other words, Pluto is going to be at the midpoint in a T-square to Sun-Moon opposite Uranus in fixed signs. It dovetails really well with the work that Pouyan is doing, that I just finished reading, with Neptune and Saturn both in Aries, and with the work that I'm doing involving the Aries vortex. It's just another contributing factor to the knowledge that we have that we are in a very special, powerful, uniquely transformative era in the history of humankind right now.
So this will be the 50th edition of this book. Been doing this for 50 years. So quite a lot has started from when the book began to now. How large was the book when it began versus now? How much more is covered now?
Well, when I first started when I was 5 years old, oh, wait a minute. When I first started the book in 1976, it was maybe 20 or 30 pages, 5.5 by 8.5, stapled pages together. And it evolved as I evolved into the markets and the financial field. We started moving to an 8.5 by 11 edition gloss cover, I think around in the 1990s. And so it's been about 30 years now that this has been a pretty sleek, very attractive presentation that we make. We take great pride in the covers that we design. They're very stunning, I think. Every year it seems to be more stunning than the last one. So yeah, this is a very special one. This is our 50th year. And, I mean, how many people have been around in business writing the same almanac for 50 years? I don't know if even Benjamin Franklin did it that long when he brought the almanac to the United States back in the 1700s. So I'm quite proud that I've resurrected this tradition that was very popular once the printing press came about and started publishing books. The astrology was very, very popular in the 1600s. There were 50 to 75,000 copies a year sold from the printing presses in Germany and in England back then. Then it went into disfavor. Astrology fell into disfavor. The almanacs became very, very sparse. And so I'm very proud of our work, and now bringing in Pouyan with Wyatt and Ulrich and Johnny to revive this noble tradition of the astrological almanac, which we started in 1976. And now you see several almanacs, yearly forecasts being made by different astrologers and market cycles analysts throughout the world. But I think we set the standard pretty high. And as Pouyan likes to say, I set the bar pretty high for quality writing. He surpassed it, I'm glad to say. Yeah, the future of the almanac's in good hands with Pouyan, but I am quite proud that we have made it 50 years and we keep advancing and progressing with this beautiful piece of work, I think.
Okay. So on our end, we have the sale still going on through the end of October, October 31st. And after that, starting November 1st, you can certainly still pre-order the book, but the price will jump up to the retail prices. You can pre-order the book all the way through December 5th, and that will make sure that your copy will be mailed out around mid-December. Ebooks will be available by December 15th. And that's again the same time frame we plan to have the print books mailed. So the plan is that most people will have their forecast books before the new year begins. Right.
And what about the audiobook?
We are going to have that available as well.
Yes. It won't include the markets. It'll be less expensive. It's everything but the markets. So order now, save big bucks on the special deal that we have that ends the end of this week, November 1st, and early next week. It's a great opportunity for those who want to get involved and learn about what we do and how our analysts, including Pouyan and myself, visualize the events, the themes involving, the culture, society, banking, interest rates, financial markets, economy, and the political matters. It's a very exciting work. I'm very pleased and proud to have these great writers and analysts with us this year to present their views, because I think they're they're remarkable in their knowledge and how they present it. You're going to love it this year. Don't miss it.
All right. Anything else you want to add, Pouyan, before we sign off today?
No, I would highly encourage getting the book this year. More so because there's a lot of important events happening in the world over the next year to 2 years, and it can really transform your lives just to be aware and prepared of change, big changes that are about to happen. That would be my only recommendation.
Well, thank you
Great.
both so much for your time today, and good luck as you finish the rest of the book in the next few weeks here. Thank you.
Thank
Thank
you.
you. Great to be with you.